you want access to this podcast earlier than any other viewer, consider becoming a channel member. All tiers get access to this podcast earlier than people who are not channel members, and it does help out this channel a lot. So if you do want to get all of the news updates, discussions, and market information for Flesh and Blood before anybody else, please make sure to become a channel member today. This podcast is also sponsored by Fyendal's Collection. Fyendal's Collection is a collection database website dedicated to showing you the market analytics of all things Flesh and Blood. Looking to track an entire master set? Fyendal's Collection has you covered. It's as easy as creating a collection in their collection tab and choosing which set you'd like to see in all of its glory. There's even an option to only add one of each equipment and cold foil, which really excites my set collecting heart. As a free user, you can upload your collection here to have a great look into what you have accomplished so far in Flesh and Blood. But if you wanted to track your collection in the secondary market, becoming a subscriber really ramps up that analytics portion of Fyendal's Collection. For a measly $3 a month, you get to see the gain and loss each of your collections receive, so you can accurately determine the worth of your cardboard, as far as dollars are concerned. Subscribers also get access to the Market Trends and EV Tracking tabs, too. Market Trends is a great way for you to see what's hot in the Flesh and Blood market, and may even give you some insight into what you should pick up for your own collection. The EV Tracker tool is another great example of the data that Fyendal's Collection can provide. Tired of wondering if you're going to get hosed if you buy a booster box or even a case? Well, the EV Tracker is constantly updated to show what your estimated value is on each Flesh and Blood sealed product, which is a great thing for sealed collectors or even people who are just looking to get into the single selling business. Again, all of these tools and more are available to you for just $3 a month. But how about a free month's trial of the site before you settle in? By going to the subscription section and choosing a promo code, you can enter my affiliate code ASHTCG, all capitalized and all one word, and you will get a month of Fyendal's Collection subscription service for free. So if you've been looking for a new card collecting database for your master set collections, or even just some small little collections of your favorite pieces of Flesh and Blood, look no further than Fyendal's Collection. Don't forget to use the promo code ASHTCG when subscribing to receive a free month of service. Thank you so much to Fyendal's Collection for sponsoring this channel, and let's get back to the video. Welcome on in, my Ashwings. How are we all doing today? That's right. I think we're going to move away from the Dragon Folk, and we're going to move on to being Ashwings. Well, you guys are Ashwings. I'm Ashen Wings. A little bit of a difference there. But welcome on in to another episode of the Common Language Podcast. I know it's been a while, and I apologize for that because I've been so busy with organizing a bunch of bulk. Everything with Rosetta was happening. I was making commoner videos for Rosetta, and I got a little carried away with myself. But I did want to make sure that we at least talk about some stuff today, because I really want to go ahead and bring this forward and talk a little bit about something that had occurred just recently. Actually, today. So if you are a channel member, you are watching this when it comes out for you. But if you are not a channel member, this is about a week after that happened. So I'm going to go ahead and just dive right on into it with what I know. Let's talk about Magic the Gathering for a little bit, because this ties in to what I'm going to talk about with myself, but I wanted to go ahead and have a discussion about this because I think it's very, very interesting how changes are made so incredibly fast to something that it's difficult to it's difficult overall to determine how something is going to be presented in the next year, 5 years, 10 years, however it might be. And today we're going to talk about the rules committee for Commander in Magic the Gathering. So recently what had just occurred was that we had, I shouldn't say we, I don't really touch Magic the Gathering much these days, as we all know. But what happened recently is that Commander, the rules committee specifically for Commander, had decided to go about banning a few things in the format. Now, a lot of these cards were made specifically for Commander, but they have uses outside of Commander if need be, whether it be for Vintage or any of that stuff out there. But at least for the overarching concept of the cards, they were big in Commander. We're talking about cards like Jeweled Lotus and Dockside Extortionist, and then also, Mana Crypt was not, or Mana Crypt, right? Yes, Mana Crypt. Mana Crypt was not made for Commander, but it had a really, really great place in Commander. And something that had, Mana Crypt just got a recent reprint in Lost Caverns of Ixalan, I think a very cool Magic the Gathering set for what it's worth. I know Jeweled Lotus just got a reprint in their Commander Master set that was just came out sometime, I think, last year, and it was this year or last year, I can't remember. But what had happened is a lot of these cards were banned, along with Nadu, right? I don't really care so much about Nadu. I think it's just funny that Nadu was such a problem in pretty much every format. So the rules committee made these bans. And a lot of these cards, barring Nadu, were fairly expensive. I think maybe Dockside was a little bit less expensive. He saw a few more reprints than the other two, but they were still fairly expensive. Jeweled Lotus was about a $90 to $100 card, depending, even just for the non-foil version of it. If you wanted the super spicy extended art, cool, crazy version of it, that was thousands of dollars or something in regards because of how rare it was to pull. So these bans recently just came out, and the Commander scene, the community, at least we're not going to say all parts of the community because not everybody was like this, but there was a big outrage, right? And the big outrage was because some of these players who were playing in Commander had worked hard day in, day out to buy these cards for their Commander deck to go play in CEDH, or just even, in their local pod. Maybe their pod is a little bit more competitive and something like a Jeweled Lotus really helped out their game plan if they had a high mana curve Commander or something. I know for the Flesh and Blood people who might have never played Magic, this doesn't make any sense to you, but Magic is a game that's been around for a while, and so I imagine you at least know a little bit. But overall, right, the changes were met with polarizing thoughts, right? A lot of people thought this is great for the format because it gets rid of fast mana things, even though they kept things like Soul Ring in there, because apparently Soul Ring is the face of Commander, right? The entire identity of Commander is something like a Soul Ring, even though Soul Ring was created in alpha, and it had its purpose in every other format prior to Commander existing. So I'm not sure why Soul Ring is such an identity structure of it, but the committee went about going and making these rules and changes, and they banned these cards. Now, the rules committee does not have any direct correlation with Wizards of the Coast, and that is because Commander was and always has been a fan-made format. So when you take a fan-made format and you ban cards in it, cards that are worth hundreds of dollars to some people, and especially to a lot of stores that have these assets lying around, it ends up being something that a lot of people get very upset about. And unfortunately, with the way trading cards work, is that when you ban cards, you also effectively take money out of the hands of businesses and of players. Because if these cards are no longer available to be played in the official format of the game, then it is a time in which their prices tank. And that feels bad, right? It is an overall feels bad. But something that a lot of players who were positive, right, who had a positive outlook on this, this is what I expected to see from a good amount of people, was that this is overall for the health of the format. right? The rules committee of a fan-made game does not care about the secondary market to the point where they're like, hey, let's let our format suffer and be absolutely abhorrent to any player who wants to play. And instead, let's just get rid of these cards, and then we can have that happen. We can get rid of these cards. The market will figure itself out. There will be new cards down the line to replace these cards and probably a more, manageable level of power. And time will move on from there, right? Wizards is always creating new stuff. There's like a new set every month and a half. So there's always something coming out for Commander for people to use. And if I were in the committee, I would make that same choice, right? It is unfortunate when things like this happen, and I'll kind of speak about how this works, and we'll go through this timeline here. So if the rules committee came to a decision to ban these cards, and I think it was a fine decision that they were banned. And the reason being is because if I, and as a member of a rules committee for Flesh and Blood in the Clash format and to be determined the Brawl format, I am very excited to make sure that my format is healthy over it being incredibly, price gouged in the sense of the cards that are necessary staples in a deck, right? Do I think that things like Jeweled Lotus and Dockside and Mana Crypt are necessary for you to play Commander? Absolutely not. I do not. I do not believe they're necessary for you to play. What this really affected was the competitive Commander players, right? CEDH players. Because a lot of times there's these big tournaments and, people save up to get into these tournaments to be competitive in EDH. And a lot of these cards end up being really, expensive to get into the game. You get the card and then you go compete. And in these competitions, sometimes there's cash prizes, sometimes there's other promos or things like that, depending on where you go. So there's that competitive edge to it, right? When you talk about the CEDH side of things. But if I were on the committee, I would be making the same decision, because at the end of the day, I would like my format to be healthy and more so remind everybody that, if Commander exists, it's meant for casual play. And while there is competitive natures in the game that people have adopted to be in their own sect of Commander, it's not the format, right? It just happens to use the same deck construction size in a different format. That's all it does. So it is very, very weird to see so many people getting upset about this. And the reason mainly being is not because people were upset that the cards were too powerful, right? I don't think I've seen a single response in regards to any of this that has said, yeah, no, I don't think those cards were powerful at all, and I think you made a poor mistake to be able to do something like that. Instead, what I see is people being upset about their money, about their investments in TCGs. And I want to make this extremely clear, if I haven't already, in several of my other podcasts. If you are investing in a TCG, if you are investing in a trading card game, you should be doing so only after you have a regular setup in a 401k and a Roth IRA, your bills are all paid, and you are debt-free, and you are looking to then put more investments into the stock market. Then, once you're looking to diversify your portfolio, instead of just being in the S&P 500, you can go ahead and take a little bit of that fund and you can put it into card games, if that's something you really want to do. This is something that is time and time again been the case that I've been preaching on this channel. As somebody who genuinely cares about the well-being of people and the knowledge that card games can be, in a way, very, very bad and get you can get people addicted to cracking packs, or, somebody wants to buy a new deck. They have to buy all these new cards for it because they're trying to follow a meta. It's very rough on the wallet if you're not prepared for these things. And so you shouldn't be considering any of your cards that you are buying an investment unless you are already set up in every other retirement plan you could possibly think of, and then you get into TCGs. And I'm not a financial advisor, but if this is going to be some sort of, worldly advice, not financial advice, but worldly advice to people who are getting into TCGs or have been affected by things like this, because the TCG market is based around players more often than not. And when bans like this happen, those cards will drop in value. Now, the kicker here is that those cards could come back. They could come back, right? In 5 years, they could go, hey, you know what? I feel like we're at a power level now where everybody's able to play at this pretty big level. We're going to just allow these cards to come back. And if they do, awesome, right? That means that people can pick up their copies they still had at home, and they can put them in their deck and they can play them, because a ban list, especially from a third-party committee outside of Wizards of the Coast, is in fact able to just make those changes, right? They could just backpedal on changes 5 years from now that 300 sets of Magic the Gathering were released, and make the change. So it's not the end of the world. It just seems like that way right now. But with all that being said, the unfortunate thing that was occurring is that several members of the committee and people who are on the Commander Advisory Group, people who just genuinely cared about the health of the format of Commander, were getting death threats. They were, acts of violence were being threatened against them. People were constantly DMing them with some of the most heinous things that I've ever seen. And everybody on the committee was getting just torn apart because of this. And if that doesn't say something about the community that Commander is right now, I don't know what does, right? If people are playing Commander as a fun, casual tabletop format or kitchen table format that people can just go ahead and play, or go to their LGS and just play around and just hang out and have fun, but the second 4 cards get banned, they're going to go online and send death threats to people on the internet. That's bad. That's a bad place for the community of Commander to be in. So I would hope that this is an opportunity for people to reflect. And it is going to be like that because due to probably at least this and several other things, I'm not part of the committee. I don't know anything that's happening on that end. I just know what was written in an article recently, also brought up by Wizards of the Coast, in that Wizards is going to be taking over the rules committee of Commander. The people who were on the rules committee and the Commander Advisory Group for Commander, they weren't getting paid for this. They weren't getting paid to do rules committee things. They weren't on the clock trying to get all of this information out to people and trying to, crunch numbers to make their format the most healthiest it could be. They weren't getting paid for any of it. And so it was a very simple thing, especially after this one instance where all these cards get banned, everybody on the committee gets a whole bunch of death threats, and then this happens. They go ahead, Jim from the Spike Feeders, Jim? I think it's Jim? I can't remember. Somebody from the Spike Feeders was in talks with Wizards, and Wizards is now going to be in charge of the ruling and banning and restricting of cards for the Commander format. Now, Wizards has been making cards for the Commander format for 10 years now, right? About 10 years they've been making cards for that. It might even be 14. I can't remember when they started, but it's been a while. And this is something I expected to happen sooner than later, but it is a shame that it had to happen on the back of such an awful, like, ousting from the community, right? If I was in charge of a committee that was here to help the health and format of, health of the format of the game that I love, and the second bans are brought up and said that, a huge portion of my committee or a huge portion of my community of the game that I love, of the format that I love, start sending me death threats and, acts, like threatening acts of violence against my life and the life of the members that are on that committee, I don't want to be a part of it. I do not want to be a part of it. And again, this is going to be a big reflection of how the Commander group as a whole, like the community of Commander as a whole, will be in a big shift. Because now you don't have a community, or a committee, I should say. You don't have a committee of people who are dedicated to bringing the health of the format to be better overall. Instead, now you have Wizards of the Coast. And Wizards of the Coast doesn't do a whole lot in regards to the health of their formats. They instead just keep printing more and more cards for people to play. And it's going to be buy these cards and get good, or deal with it, right? It's going to go right back to how it was, with it just being, hey, I can afford these cards, and because I can go ahead and play Commander at this level and you cannot. So if that's what the Magic community wants for Commander, then so be it, I guess. But every inch of this, every step of this process that was occurring, ever since the bans had happened, I was certain that this was going to happen, that Wizards was just going to end up taking over and being in charge of it, so that the direction and the actual, format itself can be built around from the design perspective of the game, and not from players who just happen to be part of a committee on this, that aren't even being paid for their input, or not even being respected, I guess. I mean, some of them are being respected for their input, but they're not being paid for any of it. It's part-time stuff that they just meet up every now and again and go, hey, how do we feel about these things? Are they bad? Should we ban them? The only thing that I could think that would make this better, right? And these are all hypotheticals. This is something that we want to bring up with Clash in Flesh and Blood, and something even with Brawl in the future. As a member of a committee that is doing work on a fan-made format and a fan-run format, something that I do want to make incredibly clear is that I would like there to be a little bit more transparency when bans do occur. If you guys don't know, there is a TCG called Grand Archive that is doing super well right now. And one of the things that allows it to be doing super well is the fact that they have a tier list system of their bannings, right? They have a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. I can't remember like how exactly it works, but essentially the concept is that tier 1 is like, it could possibly cause issues, but we haven't seen anything like it yet. So from a design perspective, we're going to kind of have this in the offshoot, but we can remove it during the next BNR if it's not been a problem. Then they have the tier 2, which is a little bit more like, we've seen this have issues, but we're not, it's got to be watched, right? It's on a watch list, essentially. If this card or these cards end up becoming more of a problem as time goes on, then we end up seeing something where they will initiate a ban for it. And then tier 3 is the official ban of the banning of the cards, right? Those are cards that are banned and will be banned, and are being put onto the ban list. So that tier 2 level where they go, hey, we have our eye on this card. This is kind of really detrimental to the health of our format, and we want to make sure that it doesn't cause problems in regards to gameplay or anything of the sort. That is a great way to have that transparency to say, like, hey, these cards have been on our radar for a while, and we decided that we're going to put them at tier 2. And if we determine later on in a month when we do another BNR that every deck that has won a big event from this point forward has had this card in it, and it's been the reason they've won, and has been the reason that they've won by a lot, right? It's not just that the fact they win. They have to completely obliterate their opponent in a level that is not fair to the overall health of the format. And that card then, after discussion with the people who make the rules and the bannings, can then move to the ban list. That is something that I would hope a lot more TCGs are prone to do. And I think that's something that could very well happen in the future of Magic the Gathering or Flesh and Blood or any of it, because that's what a community needs if they're looking to put their money into a deck. So that way, if, before the Jeweled Lotus ban, if anybody had just recently purchased a Jeweled Lotus for $90, and then they wake up the next morning to find out that Jeweled Lotus is $15 because of the banning, like, that's a lot of money to lose. And I get it, right? I totally get it. It's a lot of money to lose, and it's more detrimental to businesses, right? A business is going to lose a lot in that regard because they don't have the capital to just, like, they're not just moving these things left and right. People already have these cards, and in most cases, if they're playing Commander, they only need one copy. So they're not buying multiple copies. And while it's a staple in most cases, it is not necessary for you to play. So when you buy a starter deck, a Commander starter deck for Magic the Gathering, you don't immediately go, well, I'm going to need a Jeweled Lotus. I should probably go buy that. If you have the money for it, you might. But in most cases, you don't. And if any of these stores have really, really special shiny versions of Jeweled Lotus, then those cost way, way more than just the $90 they were going for. So it's a weird spot because I really think overall it could have been handled better, but at the end of the day, this was a spotlight shown on the Commander community and how incredibly toxic it is. Incredibly toxic. Because in most cases, if the people who love your format, who have been on a rules committee for a long time and have been looking to continuously overall improve the health of the format that they all love, if after banning 4 cards from the format, you have nothing but people who are sending acts of violence, threats of violence through people's DMs, you had several members quit the committee before even the acquisition from Wizards of the Coast. And I think a lot of people are assuming that there's a lot of greed happening, like they sold off all their copies of these cards before they banned it, which could be something that is something to watch for in a third-party committee aspect. But I doubt it really happens, right? I doubt it happens because if a format likes those cards, and if at any point that rules committee can get them back, right, then you don't need to sell it. I don't think the people who are on a part-time schedule that don't get paid for being a part of the rules committee are trying to abuse the TCG market. So it's just really, really sad to see a lot of the Commander community just like outlash like this. And it's messed up. I think it really was, that that was the straw that broke the camel's back, right? That was a lot of people were already upset with Wizards, and then the rules committee went ahead and banned these things, and now all the people who play the most popular format in Magic the Gathering now show their true colors and say, hey, I, invested in 700 copies of this card because I know it's going to continue to go up because it's such a popular card for Magic the Gathering. And, now I lost thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars because of it. And it's all your fault. Like, it's a card game. All right. It is a card game. And again, as an investment, you should make sure that you are set up in everything else that will get you more return before moving into something like card games as an investment. I don't care what your strategy is. I don't care what's happening, right? This is a luxury hobby. You have the privilege and the honor to be able to play a card game with your friends on a day off or after work, and you can spend your hard-earned money on this, or you can put it into something like the S&P 500. And if you're not doing that, then you're just throwing your money at something that at any point you could wake up and it could just vanish. It happens. It's a card game. People should care about the overall health of the gameplay first before thinking about the investment strategy of a TCG. So that's my big take here, is that I think that the rules committee was in the right. And I think that the Commander community needs to reflect and realize that what they did was they pushed and threatened the people who truly love this format out of the door and into the hands of Wizards of the Coast, who you're already mad at. So it's worse, and it's gonna probably be worse. I'm sure not everybody at Wizards has malicious intent, but I know that the CEOs do, and that's not going to be good for the overall health of the game. And we're going to see changes like that happen. So that's it for Magic. As far as Flesh and Blood, right, again, I've kind of talked about it a little bit. With being on the committee for Clash, we have a rule system and a setup, and we want to make sure people are aware of bans before they happen. The good thing about our format in Clash is that in most cases, the cards that you purchase to go into this deck are about like $2 to $3. So if we ban a card out of nowhere because, it ends up breaking a format for some reason, or breaking our format for some reason, and it's something that we did not think about testing prior, then it is enough for us to just make that change. And most people are not going to be losing money on that because it's super incredibly niche and you wouldn't have to do that. The only time you would lose out on money for that is if you decided to buy the most expensive, rarest version of a card in your Clash deck that might cost like thousands of dollars, and then we ban it. But that's on you. And luckily, you have a collectible now, right? That collectible, while banned in Clash, a format that is not the most popular format in Flesh and Blood, mind you, and is fan run, if that cold foil, or if that card gets banned, the cold foil is still going to be worth thousands of dollars because it's a rare card in most cases. So there's just a lot. There's a lot to it. But I want people to know that as a member of a committee that cares about a format and cares about the overall health of said format and the fun level of people entering into the format itself, that it's hard decisions. And it's all about finding the right ones. Because if you're not making those right decisions and you're just shooting at the hip, then shooting from the hip. You're not shooting at anybody's hip, Alex. Anyway, that's you have to make calculated decisions. And luckily with us, while we make final call, there are a lot of times in which we ask our community how they feel about cards and where we can see data for that. If we can get statistical data on these cards being a problem for the overall health of the format, then we will see that change occur. But if it's not actually a problem and somebody just really dislikes going against Icelander, we're not going to ban Icelander because 10 people told us that she's busted, right? We want to see the data. We want to know that that is happening. And so that is the purpose of a community and a committee for a fan-run format. But that's it for me. This is my whole rant. I feel really bad for the people on the committee for having to give up something that is a big passion project for them and hand it over to, the big Papa Wizards themselves. But I think at the end of the day, if Wizards made this decision and Wizards got outlashed at, that it would just go into the void, right? It'd go right into the void. Nothing would happen. But because these are people who are directly tied to Commander and their committee and the overall health of the format, these people attend conventions. They attend multiple events for Magic the Gathering. And if at any point, their life is at risk because of this, then I think it's a good idea to give it up. Because you shouldn't risk your life for a cardboard game. That's crazy. Cardboard is not worth your life. All right? So I understand why they had to do it, and I hope that the future of Commander, and the people who were, pitchforking and torching the entirety of the format get what they deserve. All right? I hope these people who threaten people's lives over cardboard get what they deserve, because it is not good. And I hope that the overall community of Commander ends up healing and getting rid of these toxic individuals in their community and can move past this and hope that Wizards has the best intentions for their format. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Love to hear from you. Thank you so much for hanging out with me while I rant about a different card game. But I wanted to make sure that this was talked about, because it is a turning point in history for Magic the Gathering, and it is another reminder that there are a lot of people out there who care about the price of cardboard much more than they care about the lives of other human beings. And that is just fucked up. So make sure to like this video if you have not already. You can do that by hitting that like button down below. Don't hit it though. Just give it a little smooch. And then you can also subscribe to the channel if you have not already, because that's how we grow, is through subscribers. So thank you all for wishing to do that. On top of it, if you are watching this video earlier than everybody else, right, that's because you're a channel member. And if you wanted to become a channel member, you will get these podcasts a week earlier than everybody else does. And that way it's a little bit more of a hot topic in the now situation instead of getting it much later. So keep an eye out for that. And then you can have that on up there. We have several, excuse me, gosh, didn't mean to just yawn like that. We have several different tiers in which you can join, so there's something there for everybody. You don't have to join the gold tier in order for you to get the podcast early or anything like that. Even if you just join at the copper tier, that is also totally fine, and it would be much appreciated. So thank you guys so much for supporting the channel in any way you can, whether it be just subscribing or becoming a channel member. And just be kind to each other. All right? Because that's what we need in life, is to be kind. to one another. And I hope that we in the Flesh and Blood community, because we're probably going to be seeing a big influx of new players sometime here pretty soon, be kind to them. And if they are not kind, don't let them in. And that's just it. So thank you again so much for watching. And I hope you all continue having fun in the Flesh and Blood. And I will see you all on our next episode of the Common Language Podcast.